If you need to know anything about Danny Bessonov, it's that he swam from Alcatraz to shore in San Francisco Bay at 9 years old. He then went on to discover Whisper Flow and a variety of other apps that have gone viral at a young age and is now the founder of Avora, a voice integrated AI platform used in dentistry. And Danny isn't your average 25-year-old Gen Z brilliant whiz kid programmer from the Bay Area. He also comes with an incredible heart and a care for making an impact in medical and dental. I got to know Danny just over a year ago, and right away I knew this kid had something incredibly special about him. He leads with his heart, he's super passionate about the work that he does, and he's also brilliant, so that helps as well. I'm really excited for you to meet Danny today and learn more about Avora because honestly, if you're not using this product within your offices, I don't know what else to tell you. But he really, really gets the idea of how convenient it is to use voice integration and then also train you, develop you, and really support you with a lot of the administrative stuff that can really bog you down so that you can be more centered and more present with human connection, which quite frankly, this industry needs a whole lot more of, especially chairside. If you've ever used Claude or ChatGPT and talked into it to make life a little bit easier to collect your notes and thoughts, then you totally get why Avora is such an awesome tool. I'm really excited to introduce Danny Bessonov from Avora on the Real Talk of Dental. Hi, Danny. Welcome to the Real Talk of Dental. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today because I think I met you maybe about a year ago around this time, actually. And the first time I met you, I thought you were just awesome. You have this incredible spirit and heart about you. And it's coupled with this Gen Z tech kid, Silicon Valley vibe as well, which is kind of hard to find these days. And you're up to some really amazing stuff. So I can't wait to dive into all of it. But first, I just wanted to ask, so it sounds like you're in San Francisco today. So tell me, you're from the Bay Area originally, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Been here my whole life.
Yeah, and you shared with me something before we started, which I think is really incredible. But you are the second youngest person to ever swim to Alcatraz and back. So tell me that story because I think it's incredible.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, and thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. And I also think, yeah, we met around a year ago, and a lot of people around me were telling me that, I have to meet Brandi, and she's super nice, super awesome, but you've exceeded all my expectations. So it's great to kind of come full circle here and have the opportunity to be on this pod. But yeah, so I grew up in the Bay Area. I kind of in Silicon Valley fashion come from a family of engineers. So my parents were engineers, my grandparents were engineers, actually some of the first programmers like ever to work in banks and on some of the first computers. And so it was kind of in my blood. I started coding when I was like 6 or 7, quite literally before I learned how to ride a bike. And I was always just like an ambitious kid. I felt like, I really loved coding. Coding gave me the ability to go and see a problem, have an idea, and go and actually solve it and implement it, which to me kind of felt like a superpower. The swimming bit was a bit random. I've been a swimmer my whole life. Like my parents enrolled me in like swim classes when I was like 2 or 3. So I was one of those kids that you just kind of threw in the water and watched them figure it out. I loved swimming. And when I was really young, my parents would take me to San Francisco and we would hang around. There's this really beautiful area called Ghirardelli Square. It's right by the water. And like when I was a kid, I would always see Alcatraz and it felt like it was pretty close. In reality, it's not that close. It's like 2 miles offshore. But I was swimming and I always felt like I heard stories, of prisoners who could never make it. And being a kid and being ambitious, I was like, I could definitely do it. And so I ended up convincing my parents to let me attempt to swim. And they were very like, no go at first. There's no way. But I got them to let me do it. And when I was 9, I actually ended up doing the swim. The swim wasn't the hardest part. It was just really cold, but it was like a 40 something minute swim. And it was definitely one of the coolest experiences I've ever had to be kind of out there in the water, swimming from shore, from Alcatraz to shore. And definitely felt like a once in a lifetime kind of thing. I was thinking about all the prisoners that never made it.
That's incredible. So did you train for it or did you just get out there and do it?
I just kind of went out there and did it because I was I was training just in a pool at that time. I was doing normal
Mhm.
swimming and competing in kind of our local and regional swim circuits. And so the only training I really had to do was get in the water and kind of try it out one time to make sure I knew how cold it was. But outside of that, I jumped off the boat and did it.
That's awesome. And then were your parents like kayaking next to you the whole time or?
Yeah, no. So the other crazy part about the story was that my mom was 9 months pregnant with my sister at the time. And so she was on the boat, but it was a whole thing where you're like getting ready to airlift her out of there because she ended up giving birth like 4 days after. So it was it was a crazy, crazy time.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible. And so, but you ended up getting beat by an 8-year-old at some point, right?
Freaking 8-year-old decided to do it after me. But I'd like to think I was the inspiration. And so when there's going to be a 4-year-old doing it pretty soon, I'll have confidence that it was because of me.
Yeah, exactly. You're the trailblazer. So how long after you completed it did the 8-year-old beat you out?
I have to check. I think it was in like 2016 or something. So I had,
Oh, so
yeah,
yeah,
I had like a good like 5 or 6 years on him.
yeah, 5 or 6 years of fame. Yeah, that's
That's
great.
right.
So, okay, so you started programming and writing code like at a really young age. Were your parents very much like must have given you a tablet or something? Were they very much like here's some tech, like get to work? Or were your parents not afraid to give you any sort of devices or technology at a young age?
It was funny. I was in practice with like one of our customers a few weeks ago, and a dentist was sharing with me that their activity with like their parents, and I think it was his dad specifically, was building a car in their garage. And for me, it wasn't a car, but it was a computer. So I'd be like building computers with my dad when I was really young, and that was like my start into really being curious about computers, coding, how the whole thing kind of goes round and works. And so, yeah, my parents were gave me a computer like right away. I never really took any coding classes. It was more I always just learned by doing. And so my dad would give me some pet projects to play with, and then I would just kind of go and run with it. And so I was always a learn by doing kind of guy, and my parents were definitely a big part of that because they just gave me the tools to be able to do it.
That's so great. And are they still working as coders and programmers and engineers and things like that now?
They are, yeah. They work in big tech. They're not coders anymore, but they still are very close to tech and just more on kind of like the management side these days.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. All right. So you started out, you were born with a computer in your hand and you swam, you swam from Alcatraz. So this is great. Do you end up going to college and pursuing more, or did you just start getting into entrepreneurship at a young age?
I definitely continued the kind of entrepreneurship thing. So in middle school and high school, my thing was making iOS apps. This is right around the time where the App Store was becoming really popular.
Hmm.
And so it's super magical for me because not only could you make websites and computer apps, you could do something on someone's phone. And so that was like a whole new world for me. And I was really into making apps for the school. So I made an like late middle school planner app for all of my fellow kind of students and peers to be able to track homework. I was always super lazy and I was never the kid to write down, what the math assignment was or what we needed to do in world history. And so I wanted there to be a way for people to share what the homework was. So I made an app for that, and I ended up figuring out what the homework was as well. But I continued doing that through high school. I had a lot of success with just releasing apps. A few of them went viral, which was an insane experience for me as like a 14-year-old. And then I did go to college. So I studied computer science at Penn. I was in this program, which was really cool. It was a dual degree program where I could study CS, but then also get some exposure to the kind of business and management side. And so that was an incredible experience. I learned a lot about running companies and building companies and some of how, the best in the world did it, which was, an awesome experience. At that time, though, I was still staying really close to startups. So throughout my undergrad and I did my master's there as well, I was always working at startups. I was really involved in, we had what we called kind of venture communities. So students could write really small, but still checks to companies and be able to fund them and get an opportunity to get involved with those companies in an early stage. And so I was super into that. I always really loved hearing what everyone was up to, across the school. A lot of the MBAs were starting companies in like really niche industries and verticals. So that was always a really cool opportunity to be able to learn about what they were doing. But so yeah, I stayed involved in startups and entrepreneurship throughout all this time, and I knew that after I graduated and finished, school, I would be starting a company pretty soon. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So what were some of the apps that went viral for you when you were like 14?
Yeah, the my favorite one is there's this trend called the Damn Daniel trend.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah, I remember that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, with
yeah,
ears and stuff?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
It's this guy
yeah, yeah,
who wore white Vans, and it was like,
yeah.
"Damn, Dan,
Yeah, yeah,
that
yeah. I
man
totally remember
white
that.
Vans." And around that time, there's this like set of apps that were really popular called like cookie clicker apps. So the Star app was an app where there's literally a cookie, and you click the cookie, and you get a bunch of different rewards for it. So you'd get on a leaderboard, and it's a whole crazy thing at the time. Like millions of people would be clicking this cookie and getting all these crazy rewards. So I, I made an app that was called the Damn Daniel button, where when you clicked it, it'd say "Damn Daniel," and you would get these like rewards. So you would get different color vans, and we would actually ship out some of these vans to you. And yeah, it went crazy viral in the first few days. We did end up getting a cease and desist from Daniel, which was fun. It was my first cease and desist, but
Oh
I
my
think
god.
I think that's one of the best ones. Yeah.
From Daniel. That's hilarious. That's great. No, I totally remember that. And I remember saying that all the time. Damn, Daniel. Yeah, I remember doing that. That's hilarious. Okay, so you finished college and you just jump into starting your own business. So what was your first business?
Yeah, and actually, before I started the company, right after college, I went to work at a company called Whisper, and at the time, it was Whisper was building a brain computer interface. So it was this crazy moonshot of a company. The goal for the company was basically to enable people to use natural language, so use like English in their words without actually saying anything out loud. And so when I was graduating, I was like, wow, that's crazy. It was a very moonshot idea. I was very into the idea of being able to go and help them develop something like that. And when I joined, it was basically just the founders and I, and a bunch of these like PhDs working on all of the complicated like neuroscience, machine learning stuff. And so I was brought on as one of the first engineers to basically help them prototype some of these ideas in the real world. And my project was called Whisper Flow. And the point of Flow was to, imagine a world where we don't have to say things out loud and be able to interact with our phones and computers, but still use our voice to just see how it would feel like, and our intention with it was just to get it out and get, 5, 10, 20 people to use it. And so for the first year I was developing Flow, we were getting a ton of really great feedback from people, but it was still just a small project and I was the only person working on it. And then around like a year and a half in, we did a private beta. And so we released Flow to around 100 people, and the reactions and like the usage was pretty crazy. It was like off the charts. People would use Flow for, hours a day. They got really upset when it went down because they couldn't talk to their computer anymore. And so that signaled to us like, hey, we're actually onto something here. Perhaps we don't even need to worry about this full moonshot brain computer interface thing. And so what ended up happening was the company fully pivoted and changed direction and course to working on Flow. We released it and it kind of blew up right away. I was there for another around 6 months after we initially released it. I mean, it was just an incredible experience to see people starting to use voice and get really comfortable with using their voice, again, to interact with their computers, with their phones. And it was at that time where I also started to kind of see the magic of voice and really started to think about like, hey, like where else could we apply some of this technology and take advantage of some of the, latest advancements that made Flow possible.
Yeah, so what's the difference between flow and whisper?
Yeah. So the whole company is called Whisper Flow. And so Flow is just a product from Whisper.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
And now obviously it ends up segueing into what's now, well, for you, creating Avora, which
Yeah.
is a voice product inside of dental, which
Yes.
when you were telling me about it, I was like, this is genius. Where have you been for all our lives in dental? And now there's more of this popping up, obviously, within
Totally.
dentistry. But tell me about why you started Avora.
Yeah, so when I was leaving Whisper, my co-founder's name is Justin. We were best friends in school and always knew we were going to start a company together. And so we both left our jobs and were brainstorming, what would be some of the most impactful applications of voice and the technology that I was working at Whisper, and Justin was actually working in healthcare at the time, also in kind of the voice space. And what we were really excited about healthcare, because for me and for Justin, what really gets us out of bed is knowing that real people are getting value from the things that we're building. And so we wanted to find a place where we felt like the technology that we would build would make a real impact on people. Healthcare, I felt like a really great place for us to start because some of the most chronically stressed out people and busy people are in healthcare. And so we spent just a lot of time with folks at practices. So not just dental to start off, we were talking to doctors and other specialties, just learning more about what a day in the life is like. We tried to spend as much time as possible in practice to actually like feel it ourselves. Because at the end of the day, we're engineers, and what our problems are and how we see the world is very different than an assistant who's in practice for 9, 10 hours a day, seeing like 50 patients a day. And so we really wanted to get in that headspace. And as we got deeper and deeper into healthcare, we got really excited about dental specifically because we felt like it was this really unique combination of, first off, early adopters. So a lot of the dentists that we spend time with are running a business, and it's hard. And so they were always looking for ways to use technology to make life better for themselves, their employees and their patients. And we felt like that was, a really great attribute to have. And then also, honestly, dentists were some of the only people that would talk to us. So we would go door to door, and dentists were really friendly. They were friendlier, than doctors and a lot of people we would chat with. And so we just ended up getting a lot deeper and a lot more familiar with all the problems that exist in the practice. Again, as we got deeper and deeper into the industry and into practice, we saw the potential for voice and voice AI technology to, again, really make an impact on providers, patients, and then helping dentists run a better business, right? And be able to overall just deliver a much better experience for their patients. And so that's originally how we got into dental and how we've been in there ever since.
Hey, I just want to pop in on today's episode and talk to you about this new GPT I wrote called Boundary Boss GPT. And it's for those moments where you've said yes to something and immediately felt that pit in your stomach, or maybe you've now written 5 drafts of an email because you're trying not to sound mean, even though you're exhausted and you swear you've said this thing so many times to the same person, or you're kind of sick and tired of staying late, taking it on, smoothing things over, and wonder why you're the one that's always burning out. A lot of the conversations that I have on this podcast, we often hear about people hitting these walls of burnout and oftentimes not even knowing what to say. So that's why I built Boundary Boss GPT. It's kind of like having me in your pocket when you're about to respond to a text, email, or team issue, and you just don't know what to say because your people-pleasing brain is completely hijacking you. This is going to help you have clarity, confidence, and self-respect without the guilt, over-explaining, or the drama. Go ahead and grab it in the show notes below. It's totally free, and you're going to love it. Okay, now back to this awesome conversation. That's fantastic. And I know Avora has been adding more and more to it since it got started. So share a little bit about where it started, the original product, and what you've developed since then after being at this now for a little bit.
Totally, yeah. The problem that we were most excited about in solving in dental is unique because it's so high volume. You're seeing so many patients a day, and there are also so many different people that are touching the patient. So, from assistant to hygiene to doctor to treatment coordinator, it's all these different people coordinating throughout an appointment and doing their absolute best to deliver an incredible experience. And so when we were brainstorming kind of the entire problem space of where do we feel like voice can make the biggest impact, what we wanted to do was say, okay, we feel like AI is going to be most impactful, in 5, 10 years in allowing people to be the most human versions of themselves. So take away all the menial stuff that you have to do that isn't just relationships and focus entirely on those relationships. And that's also how people are going to be able to, really differentiate and run different businesses and different operations just by really doubling down on that human connection. And so we wanted to build tech with voice that would take us in that direction of allowing people in the practice to just focus on their patients, deliver better experiences for their patients, and not worry about anything else. And so when we were in practice, one of the things that was really difficult was just on the documentation side. Again, if I'm an assistant and I'm in the room with a doctor who's listing out all their exam findings and asking me to treatment plan, and take down the patient's occupation so we know in 6 months when they come back for a recall what they do. I'm balancing that as well as treatment planning, as well as going in and helping out hygiene in the room right next to me. And so that really takes away from being able to focus on the patient, deliver an experience that's not rushed. And so we wanted to use that voice AI tech that we've been developing to automate documentation and to allow a doctor, even without their assistant, to be able to document everything in a visit end to end, know that everything's being documented so they can just focus on the patient, establishing a connection with them, and have confidence that's going to be even more detailed and even better than if they had to pull someone in, have them jot some stuff down, then go and send them off to do the million other things that they had to do. And so that was how we started. That was our very first product. And documentation and the idea around using AI to automate documentation has been around for a while. Like we've had voice perio technology inside of dental for probably 20 years, like Florida Probe and all of those. But when we were getting into the industry, we really felt like the technology had just gotten good enough to actually deliver on the promise of voice AI for documentation to enable adoption and to actually have people use the tech.
Yeah, I think it's really great what you're saying too, because I mean, everyone is using some form of AI now for sure, whether it's, I mean, even outside of dental, right? Just in life, like using Claude or ChatGPT or something like that. Gemini. What's the other one now? It begins with a P. A lot of people are talking about Perplexity.
Yeah, Perplexity.
Do you use that at all?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I haven't tried that out yet. But yeah, people are using all that kind of stuff. And I think what's really cool is I mean, a lot of people on the coaching side, for me, for example, a lot of us record our calls, whether it's through Otter, Fathom, whatever. And I was super pumped because now Fathom integrates with Claude and ChatGPT now, which is
Yep,
great.
yep.
You don't have to like copy paste stuff anymore. But you can take the transcript and you can ask Claude, for example, like, hey, what am I missing? Or I mean, this is pretty generic stuff, but like you can ask for it to summarize, hey, looking at it through this lens, et cetera, et cetera. And it's like incredibly helpful. And like you're saying, it amplifies the amount of output that, say, even as a coach, like I can do. And this is for a leader, for anyone, right, who's having any kind of conversation. By being able to record that, have something else audit it and give you feedback from an unfiltered lens, because like you and I are having this conversation, I'm going to leave feeling and hearing stuff. You're going to leave feeling and hearing something. The listeners and the viewers are going to leave feeling and hearing something, because we all have our own lens based on our own programming that we're going to hear it. But AI, I know this is up for debate, the lens of which it looks through things. But if you're asking it to look through it like, objectively, then it does speed up the results, right? Like you can do so much more by just having the transcript of the conversations and being able to, like, you can take one transcript and do so much with it depending on the angle of what you need from it. And it allows me to be more present with my clients, like even from a note-taking perspective, because I've been coaching for 20 years. I mean, I would type notes as people talked or handwrite notes. And obviously it was a distraction from the call, and I would try to be typing as fast as possible to capture whatever they're saying, because I would forget or whatever. And now it's like I can be fully present in the moment because something else is taking notes for me, and then I can use those notes later however I need them. But
Yep.
I really like what you're saying. It actually adds more to the human element of connection, because you're taking out that like administrative task that can be automated. And something else that I really love about Avora, that you've heard me when I'm like selling your product to everybody at shows and stuff, because I just think it's so cool and I love you and I think you're great. So I think everyone should work with you. But it coaches you and tells you, like, if you're meeting with a patient, right,
Yep.
and chair side, you're missing. I mean, I've been coaching for a long time. I know for a fact, like when you're chair side with a patient, you're missing a lot of the dialogue, because you're stressed, you have a million things going on your mind. Like the doctor is like doing a hygiene check or something, but they're
Totally.
about the patient in the other room they got to get back to, and someone else is barking, and they just have so much going on. They're never fully present. As much as they like to say they are, they're not. And
Totally.
if a patient declines treatment or has something come up, It's what this does is it actually has the entire transcript, and then it can coach you on how to follow up with that patient. And this is great too if you have turnover in those roles for treatment planners or front office or anything like that. It's actually giving that advice on how you can approach those conversations in a better, more meaningful way
Yeah.
than relying on your own memory for everything, which I think is awesome.
No, exactly. And exactly what you're hitting on is the other thing that we noticed when we spent a lot of time in practice was, you know, as a coach, as a doctor, as an office manager, you can't be in every room at once. Even if you wanted to teleport, it would still be a lot of work to go and listen
Mm,
to every single appointment and make sure that your team and, even you sometimes are kind of upholding that patient experience standard that you would like. And so we felt like there's just this treasure chest of data sitting inside every operatory that, before we started doing the recordings was literally just no one had that data, it was just going to waste, right? And we would see sometimes, like I was saying, if a coach was in practice, they'd be shadowing an appointment, or a doctor would ask a treatment coordinator the next day, like, hey, why did so and so say no? I'm like, when I was walking out, I thought that we were all
yeah.
good to go. And so one of the really awesome, parts of Avora and things that we've been excited to develop is, uh, like you're saying, AI to coach the team and number one, give feedback on where there's opportunities to improve verbiage, improve the conversation flow, improve a team handoff, from what an assistant is telling the doctor or what the doctor is telling a treatment coordinator, and then actually help you track that over time. So, when I'm on a call and I'm talking to someone, that call is recorded. And after I'll go and sit down with my best friend, ChatGPT or Claude, and we'll go and walk through the call and see, like, hey, I felt like Claude was telling me this. You could have spent more time in the beginning, like doing a discovery with whoever you're talking to. Or, hey, you actually missed this cue and, the person wanted you to dive into this and you just flew past it. And so we wanted to take that and be able to deliver the same experience in a context like dental, where it's more complicated. It's not just one person. It's much more of a coordination game where then you have up to 4 or 5 people that are going to be in the room at any given point. But we wanted to make it super easy to be able to track, patient experience and quality over time and make sure that both, the team, dentist owner, if you're in a group, it's like leadership feels confident that they know exactly what they should be focusing on and what like a tactical planned improvement is. And so definitely one of my favorite parts of our product. And I think it's also been one of the most impactful, whenever we go into a practice and deploy or group, they love the note taking. And that's often why they can't live without a Boris. If the internet goes out one day, you just don't want to do your own notes. But from, really driving like an ROI and helping a practice improve their patient experience and case acceptance, that feedback is just invaluable because it gives you visibility into what's going on day to day, helps you figure out what you can do to improve, improve verbiage and improve coordination, and then actually action on it. So keep you accountable and make sure that you are doing what you think you're doing with every patient.
Yeah, and I quite frankly, I don't know how any group or DSO lives without these things because even from a regional operations perspective or clinical director or anything like that, to be able to have the eyes and ears everywhere so that you can do the proper training and be able to support your teams in a real way. I mean, it just seems like a total no-brainer for me. And like you've been saying, it allows you to be more present with your
Yep.
people because you're not going in like as a coach, like you said, even when I do practice visits, I'm literally like listening in from the hallway and I can't be with other people during that time because I'm listening and taking notes, on my phone or notepad so I can get back to them later on what I hear versus just being able to scan the transcripts and get the output and then coach based on that versus having to do it all myself. I mean, hours. I spend hours in hallways listening to
Yeah.
conversations happens, you know? And so this is just, yeah, it's kind of a no-brainer for me. So, okay, so what do you think? Let's talk to the haters out there. You know, you're this young kid who just swam from Alcatraz when you were like 3 years old. Like, whatever. No, I'm kidding, you're 9. But, you're sitting in, the Bay Area coding away. What do you say to people that they're just like, oh, there's a young kid? Because I do hear from a lot, like I'll be at events, and events have changed, obviously over the last few years. Where, and I mean, I've probably even said this myself, either definitely under my breath, if not to the person next to me, where it's like,
Yeah,
oh, the tech bros have entered the space in dental, and about a decade, behind, because dentistry is always a decade behind.
right.
And a lot of this has already been happening in medical. And if you just want to see like what you can do, just look at what's happening on the medical side and apply it to dental. But like, what do you say to people out there that just kind of roll their eyes at all this tech just descending upon the industry? And especially someone like you who's young, you're very kind, you're not a vulture, right? Which is also unique to
Appreciate that.
people like you. So, like, yeah, what do you say to that, I guess?
Yeah, listen, I think, you know, a lot of tech bros and and tech in general does get a bad rep. Honestly, sometimes for good reason, because what tech is and, people that work in tech are notorious for is oversimplifying things
Mm,
and coming into an industry or coming into something and just being like super easy. I'm gonna go write my 20 lines of code and just be done with it. And what, myself and my co-founder and our entire team is extremely careful with is to not underestimate the complexity of an industry like dental. Before we even started, we spent like almost 6 months in practice just learning and trying to be as humble as we can and for good reason, right? Because we didn't know anything. And as we built the product and as we work with our customers, we always try and maintain that attitude. There's always more for us to learn. The customer is always right when something isn't getting adopted. It's not because your team, isn't good. It's because our product isn't easy enough to use. And so for us, that's led to just an incredible amount of learning and product growth. And I think, relative to some of the other products in the market and just other, people, like you said, just ballooning in and coming in into the industry, we truly have an understanding of the nuances of every practice, from obviously you have GP specialty, but like every practice is different. Every practice's team dynamics are different. There's so many different types of appointments and workflows within the appointment. I'll give you like a tactical example. One of our very first learnings with our scribe was that there's a huge difference between exams and restorative appointments.
mm,
Because from a scribe perspective, during an exam, there's so much patient talking and a lot of that information just gets out there. But during like if I'm doing a filling, I'm not verbalizing how much anesthetic I'm using. And so that was one of the early things where we're like, okay, well, we got that completely wrong. And we had to rebuild parts of the product to allow practice to use Avora for every single appointment, not just exams. On the coaching side, there's so much nuance between from a practice that's doing all on fours versus I'm GP versus I'm like GP and we just started doing Invisalign and who needs to get coached, right? Because maybe it's the person at the front, or maybe you just hired a new treatment coordinator, or maybe you have a few new grads who just got out of school and have never really presented treatment in their life. Maybe everyone on the team is really great, but we aren't doing handoffs and we need to drill down into those. So, anyways, there's just so much nuance in the industry where, like, even today, I still think it's basically day one for us. And every single group, every single practice we work with, we come in with an open mind, fully assuming, that we think the product is great. And, at this point, hundreds of practices love us and can vouch for us. But there still might be so much for us to learn and, make the product just that much better, that much easier to implement and help you drive, just that much more impact.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think that is what's really cool too about tech is it's always evolving, and it's something that you can continuously update and upgrade and add to. And again, anyone that's using AI, even on the most basic of terms these days, see that, the major platforms are always adding more to it. And you're like, this is blowing my mind. I mean, Claude is like out of control lately. I'm like,
It is,
Where
yeah, they're
it's insane.
they're
Yeah,
hard
it's so
over.
fun. Yeah, and I just talk about Claude like, he's my new bestie, like you said. So before we go, what's something that you've learned about yourself this last year? Because I mean, you went full in. I've seen you at so many shows. Like you were constantly traveling. You were, I think, living on caffeine there for a while. I was worried about your adrenals. I mean, aside from the business, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, dentistry, aside from dentistry, that's one thing. But like, what have you learned truly like about yourself? Because you're young, but you're going for it. I mean, you're working your ass off. You really are.
I feel like the biggest thing is I always wondered before I actually started a business, like what would keep me going. I thought it would be just, like the love of making things. Since I've been coding for so long, I figured, hey, I'm gonna really enjoy coding and running a business. Turns out there's so much more to running a business than coding. And, I thankfully don't have to do that all on my own anymore. I have a great team to help me do that. I feel like what's really kept me going and what's been surprising to me is like we talked about, what gets me out of bed is seeing something that I'm making or I'm working on have a real impact on people. And so, for me, I try and be in practice like once every 2 weeks and going in practice and seeing someone using Avora. Like I was saying, the internet goes out and they're like, oh man, like I can't even practice today. Seeing like something that we thought of, and we're, working our butts off to make better, have that kind of an impact on a person has been extremely gratifying. And it is what I feel like I didn't fully expect to be like the thing that keeps me going. But in retrospect is like absolutely the thing that keeps me going. Because it's not, it's not easy to do 16, 17-hour work days like back to back to back without seeing that kind of impact and knowing that what we're doing is actually really useful and really impactful for people.
That's awesome. And how do you shut your brain off? I know you mentioned you still swim and your brain might not ever like wind down, but when you're not changing the world with your programming and coding, what are you doing? How do you chill? How does Danny chill?
Yeah, swimming's a huge one for me. I feel like the water is my happy place, and so I was telling you, like, I'll go and swim in the bay. Not doing the Alcatraz swim every day. That'd be a little much, but going in, swimming in the bay, I live right by the water, has been kind of an incredible reset for me. We work by the water, which is really nice, and so we'll take walks and be able to clear our heads there. But I think you're right. I'm not sure if my brain ever turns off completely. It's more just like a smooth level set.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. You're awesome. It's such a fun experience for me, just being able to witness you from afar and see your growth and all that you're adding to the industry. I'm so glad that you found your way into dentistry and that you're doing all the work that you're doing because you're making a really big difference. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Hope to be back again soon.
You just listened to the real talk of dental. If it hit, if it stung, if it made you feel just a little more human, good. That's the point. This isn't about fixing practices, it's about healing people. And if you're brave enough to show up real in this industry, you're my kind of leader. Subscribe, call in, send your wildest workplace confession. And most importantly, don't clean up for anyone. The mess, that's where the magic lives. We'll see you again on the next episode.